Welcome, friends. You're watching Animal Attacks. Today, I'll be covering some of the most terrifying great white shark attacks ever recorded, beginning with a naval crew that saw something big in the waters. June 22nd, 2021. A gray fog sat low over the cold water near the Farallon Islands off the coast of California. The sea looked calm and flat that morning, but calm water does not always mean safe water. And Chief Boatswain's mate Finn Adam was about to find that out the hard way. Finn Adam was 44 years old, with more than 20 years of experience at sea. He was known as one of the most trusted deck supervisors in his command. Younger sailors looked up to him because he had handled storms, broken equipment, and rescue missions without ever losing his cool. That morning started like any other training day. A heavy buoy used for equipment drills broke loose from its tow line and drifted several hundred feet away from the ship. Finn Adam volunteered to take out a small inflatable boat with 3 other sailors to bring it back. When the crew reached the buoy, something felt off right away. Deep scars and bite marks covered the bottom of it. These were not new marks either. They had built up over past seasons, left behind by sharks that had bitten the buoy before. Nobody on the crew said much about it. The buoy always came back looking like that. It was normal to them. So they got to work reconnecting the tow line, and nobody thought twice. What makes me wonder is how a guy with 20 years on the water, who had seen storms and rescues and everything in between, could still end up in a situation like this. You would think experience would protect you, but the ocean does not care about your resume. As the crew worked to reattach the line, a huge great white shark surfaced right next to the buoy. The great white shark, known by the scientific name Carcharodon carcharias, is one of the strongest predators in the ocean. It can even detect the tiny electrical signals given off by living animals when it gets close, helping it find prey in the final moments before a strike. Great white sharks are also known to test unfamiliar objects with a bite before deciding whether something is worth attacking. This shark circled the buoy a few times, then bit down hard, shaking it violently from side to side. At first, it looked threatening. It was showing its capabilities before appearing to lose interest and drift off a short distance. The Farallon Islands are known for their large seal and sea lion populations, and the surrounding waters are a common hunting ground for great whites, which may explain why the shark was already in the area that morning. Finn was standing partly outside the small boat, leaning over the pontoon while holding on to the rope to keep it steady. As he reached further out to secure the line, he lost his footing slightly and splashed into the water at the edge of the boat. Nobody expected what happened next. That sudden movement, right after the shark had already been circling close by, was likely enough to pull its attention straight back. Without warning, the shark surged upward from beneath the boat, struck Finn, and clamped onto his torso. The force of the attack rocked the small boat so hard that another sailor nearly lost his balance. The shark did not let go right away. It pulled him toward the water before violently shaking its head, a move great white sharks often use when attacking large prey. Leaning over the side of a small boat with your hands full of rope, completely exposed, while something big is circling underneath, that is not just a job anymore. That is a nightmare waiting to happen. And the worst part is, you would not even see it coming. One moment, it was a normal recovery job. The next moment, one of their own was gone, pulled under before anyone could even react. That kind of sudden shift is hard to even picture unless you have lived through something like it. The rest of the crew lunged for the rope, grabbing at Finn and trying to haul him back aboard. For a few desperate seconds, they had a hold on him, but the shark's grip and one final violent head shake tore him loose before they could pull him free. Only then, with nothing left to grab onto, did the crew pull back from the buoy, fearing another strike. The ship's medical team prepared to receive the crew while the inflatable raced back toward the ship, but by the time it made it back, there was nothing left for them to do. The cause of death was later listed as severe blood loss combined with massive trauma to the chest and abdomen, injuries consistent with a powerful shark attack. Investigators noted that the attack likely lasted only a few seconds from the first strike to the moment the sailor was pulled under, leaving almost no window for anyone to help him. Investigators believed the shark had likely been investigating the buoy rather than targeting a person. Once Finn hit the water, however, he became the closest moving object, and the shark reacted almost instantly. The crew estimated the shark at close to 16 feet, though investigators noted that size estimates made during a sudden, violent encounter from a small inflatable boat are often exaggerated and difficult to verify with any real accuracy. A nearby ship's camera reportedly captured only a partial view of the incident, and out of respect for the family, no footage was released to the public. I sit here thinking about this, and I wonder if that sailor felt anything before it happened. Did some part of him sense the shark was still there, even after it seemed to lose interest in buoy? Because the shark was not hunting the crew at that moment. It was simply curious. But the moment a person hit the water, everything changed. The shark reacted in seconds, and nobody on the boat had time to stop it. The next story takes us to the coast of South Africa, where a lone spear fisherman ignored a closed beach, swam straight into water already thick with blood, and had no idea something far bigger than any fish was already circling nearby. July 19th, 2013. Thick fog rolled over the cold Atlantic near Gansbaai, South Africa. Something dead was already drifting just offshore, and Leo Carter was about to swim straight toward it. While another diver watched from not too far away, Leo was 29 years old, a spear fisherman well known across Hermanus for hunting alone. He never liked bringing a partner or a support boat along. 2 days before this, a dead southern right whale calf had washed up against the rocky reefs near Gansbaai. It had been slowly breaking down, releasing body fluids and bits of tissue into the water ever since. Local authorities closed the beaches right away. They knew exactly what a slick like that pulls in from deeper water, but Leo did not stay away. He drove to a quiet cove nearby instead, hoping to take advantage of all the fish gathering around the spill. A local diver, out checking lobster traps along the same stretch of coast, spotted Leo's truck parked near the closed access road and figured someone else had the same idea he did, staying just outside the restricted zone to avoid trouble. The thing I find hard to accept is that a guy who spent so much time in the water could ignore something so obvious. A dead whale, 2 days of blood and oil spreading through the sea, beaches closed by the authorities themselves. That is not subtle. That is the ocean screaming at you to stay out. And he went anyway. Leo suited up and dropped into the water near the closed cove. Visibility was poor that day because of the thick fog and natural particles in the water. He speared a large yellowtail kingfish about 30 feet below the surface. Then he made one small decision that changed everything that followed. Instead of towing the bleeding fish behind him on a separate float line, he clipped it directly onto his hip belt and kept swimming toward open water. What really sticks with me is him attaching that fish to his belt, 30 feet down in water, known for great white sharks, leaving a trail of blood behind him. The way I see it, he might as well have been wearing a sign that said, "Come and get me." That blood was sending out a signal to anything with a nose for prey, and in those waters, that means great whites. If you ask me, that's not a small oversight. That's basically handing yourself over to whatever's out there waiting. I wonder if he even realized what he was doing before it was too late. An adult female great white shark, estimated at around 15 feet, had likely been returning to feed on the whale carcass over the previous 2 days. Great white sharks have organs called the ampullae of Lorenzini, tiny sensors that pick up faint electrical signals given off by any living creature nearby, though these only come into play at very close range. From farther off, it is scent that leads them in first, followed by the lateral line, a sense that picks up vibrations and movement in the water even when a shark cannot see clearly. Only in the final few feet do the ampullae of Lorenzini help lock onto the exact position of a target. The nearby diver, floating near the surface, checking his traps, first noticed a large, dark shape moving beneath him through the murky water, heading in Leo's direction. He assumed it was a seal at first, until the size of the shape became impossible to ignore. As the shark moved through the murky water that afternoon, the scent of the bleeding fish clipped to Leo's side likely reached her first, carried on the current. The vibrations of the struggling fish then drew her the rest of the way in. The witnessing diver swam toward the surface and shouted to warn Leo, but the distance between them and the fog sitting low over the water swallowed the sound before it ever reached him. She did not circle him first. She did not test him with a light bite, the way sharks sometimes do with something unfamiliar. Through the murky water, the witness could only make out fragments of what happened next. But he saw enough to know she rose quickly and struck, tearing into Leo's midsection in one powerful motion before shaking her head violently, ripping through flesh as she pulled him under. A cloud of blood spread through the water around them. Within seconds, she disappeared beneath the surface with Leo, leaving nothing behind but churned water and floating debris. I keep thinking about how the shark did not even need to see him clearly. Through all that murky, bloody water, she picked up his movement and vibrations well before she ever needed her eyes. I wonder if he ever had a single second to understand what was closing in on him before it was already too late. The witness swam hard for shore, badly shaken, and reached a nearby access point where he flagged down a passing vehicle to call for help. He later told authorities he saw the attack unfold from roughly 60 feet away through poor visibility, and never once saw Leo surface again after the shark pulled him under. A spotter plane flying along the coastline searched the area a short while later. Recovery teams were sent out immediately. All they found floating on the surface was Leo's spear gun and several torn pieces of his wetsuit. No trace of his body was ever recovered. Authorities treated the incident as a fatal great white shark attack based on the witness's account and the evidence found at the scene. Leo was later officially declared dead. According to me, the worst part is what they found afterward. Discolored water, torn pieces of his wetsuit, his spear gun floating by itself. That was all they found. And that whale carcass was sitting there in plain sight the entire time. He never had to be anywhere near that water. That is the part I find hardest to sit with. The next story takes us further along the same rugged coastline to a commercial diver who worked alone beside an active seal colony every single morning, never once stopping to think about what might already be hunting in the water beneath him. November 14th, 2015. Cold swells were pounding granite drop-offs near the South Neptune Islands off South Australia. Julian Thorne went under the surface that morning with his tender crew stationed on the boat above, working the reef itself completely alone, the way he always preferred it. He had no idea something was already waiting in the dark water below him. Julian was 34 years old, a commercial abalone diver with a decade of experience working those cold, rough waters. He was quiet and careful about following every safety procedure on the boat. But there was one habit his crew always worried about. He liked diving by himself along deep rock ledges where high-value abalone clustered, even though everyone on his boat knew those same ledges sat right next to large colonies of Australian sea lions and long-nosed fur seals. At 5:45 in the morning, under thick overcast skies and heavy swell, Julian suited up in thick neoprene, strapped a weight belt around his waist, and connected himself to a Hoka airline running back up to the surface tender. Visibility that morning was under 10 feet, thanks to plankton blooms and rough surf stirring up the kelp beds around him. Once he reached the reef, Julian worked close to a steep underwater rock chimney sitting right beside a seal haul out. He used a steel hammer to free a trapped abalone iron wedged between two rocks while continuing his work along the granite wall. Above him, sea lions regularly moved in and out of the nearby colony, an area already known to attract great white sharks searching for prey. Honestly, I think working alone beside an active seal colony is already pushing your luck pretty far. The sea lions were reason enough for a great white to be nearby, and with visibility that poor, neither the diver nor the shark had much chance of detecting the other before the encounter. A large great white shark, estimated between 16 and 18 feet, was already swimming through the deeper water beyond the drop-off that morning, patrolling the same waters where seals regularly gathered to feed and rest. Great white sharks like her rely on an ambush hunting style built entirely around surprise, striking upward from below at speeds that can top 25 miles per hour, using the full weight and momentum of their body to deliver a single crushing blow before their prey even senses danger. Their powerful jaws can cause deadly injuries with a single bite, which is why this attack happens so fast. Already hunting near the seal colony, the shark followed the reef edge through the cloudy water, eventually passing beneath the area where Julian was working. And this is the part where everything about that morning turned in an instant. She struck Julian with tremendous force. His hookah air hose was severed during the bite. The collision drove both of them upward through the water before the shark shook her head violently, pulling him free from his weight belt and inflicting catastrophic injuries. The whole attack, from the first strike to the shark disappearing back beneath the surface, lasted only a matter of seconds. What stays with me about this one is the sound his crew described hearing before they even understood what was happening. Just a sudden explosion of water, followed by the shark briefly breaking the surface as the torn air hose whipped across the water behind it. The crew on the surface heard the impact and turned just in time to see blood spreading fast across the water. They radioed for emergency help immediately, but the remote location meant a rescue boat was still close to 30 minutes away. By the time help arrived, the search team found Julian's torn weight belt, a section of the damaged hookah air hose, one of his gloves, and the abalone iron he had been working to free, floating near the attack site. Julian himself was never found. Authorities concluded Julian was likely killed in the shark attack, based on the damaged equipment, witness accounts, and the amount of blood left at the scene. The next story moves to American coastline, where a young surfer paddled out completely alone at dusk into water turned murky by a nearby river mouth, sitting on his board in a way that made him look exactly like the one animal that same predator was already hunting for that evening. September 2nd, 2022. Heavy swell rolled into a quiet stretch of coast near Wattle Creek in San Mateo County, California. The light was already fading fast, and Mateo Silva was about to paddle straight into water where a great white had been hunting. Mateo was 22 years old, a well-known local surfer from Santa Cruz who was always chasing remote, uncrowded breaks up and down the coast. He had grown up on that stretch of shoreline and knew most of the local surf spots better than almost anyone his age. That afternoon, the river mouth near Wattle Creek was thick with silty runoff after days of light rain upstream, badly cutting down how far anyone could see below the surface. A few surfers who had been out earlier in the day already paddled in once the visibility dropped, deciding the conditions were not worth the risk. Mateo stayed out longer than any of them, chasing one last set before dark. At 7:10 in the evening, with dusk settling in fast and the water turning a dull gray-brown, Mateo paddled out completely alone. He sat on his shortboard with his arms and legs hanging down into the murky water, waiting for a set to roll in. From below, his shape on the surface could have looked enough like a seal to fool a hunting great white in the fading light. What haunts me is how you look at that water, murky from the river, dusk settling in, completely isolated, and still decide to paddle out alone. I mean, every single condition was wrong, and he still went. That's what I don't understand. A great white shark, about 16 feet long, was likely hunting near the river mouth, where harbor seals often gathered to feed on baitfish carried by the current. Great whites often hunt in these areas, especially around dawn and dusk when seals are active. A resting seal and a person sitting still on a board can look almost the same from that angle, especially in water clouded by runoff and sediment. That single detail can sometimes be enough for a shark to mistake a person for its usual prey and commit to an attack. The thing I find hard to believe is that he was sitting there with his arms and legs dangling in the water like it was nothing. From below, he could easily have looked enough like a sea lion for a great white to mistake him for one. That's what makes this attack feel so tragic to me. Hidden by the cloudy water, the great white moved in from deeper water before rising toward the dark shape on the surface. And this is the exact moment where everything about that quiet evening turned into something else entirely. He struck from behind without warning, biting straight through the tail section of the surfboard board while clamping down hard on Mateo's lower leg in one single explosive motion. The force of the strike was strong enough to lift the front half of the board clean out of the water. A violent lateral head shake ripped Mateo off the board completely, tearing through muscle and severing a major blood vessel in his leg almost instantly. Blood spread fast across the surface around him as he was pulled beneath the surface. There is something about that single strike I cannot stop turning over in my head. It was already catastrophic enough on its own to leave Mateo with almost no chance of survival. A surfer still out near the point turned at the sound of the impact and caught sight of the splashing, the shattered tail of the board, and blood spreading fast across the surface before Mateo went under. He paddled hard toward shore to raise the alarm. A search was launched within the hour, with local rescue crews and a few volunteer boats combing the area near the river mouth into the night. Beachgoers found Mateo's board washed up on shore the following morning, roughly 1 mile down the coast from where he had last been seen paddling out. The tail section had been completely torn away, leaving a wide crescent of serrated bite marks cut deep across the fractured fiberglass, consistent with a bite radius from an adult great white shark of significant size. Authorities concluded that the injuries observed during the attack were unsurvivable, and Mateo was legally declared dead after the search was called off. Investigators also said that the low light, cloudy water, and the fact that he was alone likely contributed to the attack. To me, the most heartbreaking detail is his board washing up with that massive bite mark right through it. That board was supposed to keep him safe, keep him on the surface, and the shark bit through it like it was nothing. If that doesn't make you rethink every surf session in murky water, I don't know what will. The next story moves to a woman who understood shark behavior better than almost anyone on that beach that day and still misread the one type of ocean event that marine experts consider one of the most unpredictable moments to be anywhere near the water. November 27th, 2022. Clear skies sat over Mossel Bay on South Africa's Western Cape. Seabirds were diving hard just offshore, and Ivy Joy was about to swim straight into the middle of it, camera in hand. Ivy was 31 years old. She had a marine biology degree and worked as a wildlife filmmaker. She knew a lot about sharks and how they act, but that knowledge made her feel too safe. She thought it would protect her in the water. That afternoon, she was filming with a small crew. Birds were diving hard over a school of small fish just offshore. In minutes, things got wild. The birds dropped straight down into the water again and again. The small fish below scattered in every direction. This was a clear sign that something big was pushing them from below. Ivy had filmed this kind of surface activity many times before, and in her experience, it was almost always common dolphins or bronze whalers working a bait ball from underneath, not something more dangerous. The boat's fish finder also showed the densest part of the school sitting in shallower water closer to the boat, which led her to believe she could stay at the outer edge of the activity safely outside where any larger predator would likely be feeding. Trusting that red, she put on her snorkel gear and entered the water to film what she believed was a safe distance from the action. Some nearby boat crews grew uneasy as the birds continued diving, recognizing that the activity could also attract large predators, though it was not yet clear whether sharks were actually feeding beneath the surface. To me, this is the part that stands out the most. Understanding an animal's behavior is not the same as being protected from it. Sometimes, knowledge just changes how a risk looks in your head, not how dangerous it actually is, once you are standing right inside it. One member of Ivy's crew suggested waiting until the activity settled down, but Ivy believed she could remain at the edge of the fish while filming. The crew stayed aboard, continuing to monitor her from the boat. She swam further out toward the edge of the fish, her camera pointed down into the water. The small fish gathered into a dense bait ball beneath her, shifting direction repeatedly as they reacted to movement below. Occasional splashes broke the surface as seabirds continued diving overhead. A great white shark had likely already been investigating the bait fish beneath the school before Ivy entered the water, deeper than the sonar reading from the boat had suggested. Great whites are drawn to concentrations of prey, and in water filled with fast-moving fish, a person entering the same area can unexpectedly end up in the shark's path. And that is exactly the moment where everything shifted for Ivy without a single second of warning. As the baitfish shifted direction beneath her, the shark accelerated through the school and reached Ivy within seconds. It struck once with catastrophic force, tearing open her chest and severing major blood vessels in her torso, then quickly turned away and disappeared back into the baitfish. From the boat, her crew saw the water turn red within seconds, while fish kept splashing and birds continued diving all around her. I think about how fast that shark moved on afterward. It was not circling her, not testing her the way some sharks do with unfamiliar objects. She was simply in the same water as hundreds of panicking fish, and that alone was more than enough to put her directly in its path. Her crew reached her within minutes, pulling her out of the water and radioing for emergency help immediately. But the injuries from the single strike were already catastrophic, and the blood loss proved fatal before any help could reach the boat. She was pronounced dead a short time later after suffering catastrophic injuries and severe blood loss from a single bite to the torso. The attack happened after she entered an area where a great white had already been investigating the concentrated baitfish below. Investigators later reviewed the onboard recording as part of their assessment of the incident. What I was thinking is that she had every tool available to understand exactly what she was swimming into. She had studied this behavior for years. And none of that changed what happened once she was in the water with hundreds of fish and one shark that had already committed to feeding. Ivy had the training to recognize that unusual baitfish activity could attract large predators. She entered the water believing she could safely film from the edge of the activity, but she underestimated how quickly the situation could change. The final story moves north along the same coastline where thick fog rolled over a marathon swimmer training largely alone after her support kayak turned back, leaving her swimming through water known for gathering some of the largest great white sharks found anywhere along that coast. October 28, 2020. Thick fog rolled over the water near the southeast Farallon Islands off San Francisco. Visibility dropped to under 15 feet, and Zoe Grace was about to swim through it largely alone, with nobody paddling right beside her in the water. Zoe was 51 years old. She was a retired orthopedic surgeon and an elite open water swimmer. Everyone in her training group knew her for pushing through cold, rough water without much hesitation. She had spent years training along Northern California's coastline, gradually taking on longer and more demanding swims. On that morning, she chose a route that passed unusually close to the southeast Farallon Islands, despite late October being the peak season when adult great white sharks gather there to hunt young elephant seals. That morning, her escort kayak struck a submerged rock shortly after launch and began taking on water, forcing her support paddler to turn back toward shore for repairs. Expecting the replacement kayak to reach her within minutes, Zoe remained in the water rather than ending the session immediately, and the equipment failure left her temporarily without any support nearby. I keep coming back to that damaged kayak. It felt like the ocean itself handed her a clear reason to end the session and wait safely on the beach. Instead, she remained in the water, expecting her escort to return within minutes. The delay seemed temporary, but it left her alone in conditions where even a few minutes without support could make all the difference. The water that morning was cold, dark, and nearly silent, with visibility so poor that even her own support crew back on shore lost sight of her within the first few minutes. A large male great white shark moved slowly along the kelp line, about 40 feet below the surface. Great white sharks have sensitive organs along their sides called the lateral line. This system picks up vibrations in the water from far away. Those vibrations can resemble the movement of prey, causing a shark to investigate. As Zoe swam through the fog, those vibrations moved down through the water, growing stronger as she got closer. The shark began rising slowly, tracking the steady rhythm above him. That is the exact point where the morning changed in an instant, with no warning at all. He struck from directly beneath her, throwing half her body out of the water. The hit alone knocked the air from her lungs before his jaws closed around her. He twisted his body in a tight side roll, a move great whites use to tear flesh while pulling prey under. The roll dragged Zoe beneath the surface almost instantly, causing severe injuries to her chest before she had any chance to react. What strikes me most about this one is how little warning existed out there in that fog. No fin cutting the surface, no shadow passing below her, nothing visible at all until the attack was already fully underway, and by then there was nothing left that anyone could have done. A short while later, searchers combing the fog found a trail of blood and disturbed water near the last location where Zoe had been seen swimming. They also recovered her swim cap, goggles, and tow float during the search. Despite an extended search lasting into the next day, no further trace of her was ever recovered. Authorities concluded she likely suffered fatal injuries during the attack based on the circumstances and witness evidence. Her support crew, still on their way back with a new kayak, reached the scene only minutes after the attack. By then, the disturbed water had already begun to settle, and there was no sign of Zoe anywhere on the surface. Zoe had spent years training her body to handle cold water, rough seas, and long distances most people could never manage. None of that could prepare her for a shark she never saw coming, hiding in the fog, hiding in fog thick enough to hide anything below the surface.